Welcome to the Qualitalks Podcast, a show about pharma and GMP. The pharmaceutical industry is a fascinating and complex field, and it takes countless people to bring a product to the market. In this podcast, we bring you some of the industry's brightest minds who will share their wisdom with you. And now, please welcome your host, Jan Kugel.
Welcome to today's episode, focusing on female leadership in pharma, the challenges and opportunities. And our guest today is Christy Mazzarisi, and she is a distinguished leader in the pharmaceutical industry with extensive experience in quality systems and leadership roles. And in this episode, we explore Christy's journey in pharma, her work's impact on advocacy and leadership, and her vision for empowering women in the pharmaceutical industry. So, Christy, welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you here again.
Thank you. No, I appreciate it. I enjoy, spreading some information and sharing what I can with everyone. So thanks, Jan, for having me again.
Yeah, so it's my pleasure. So to dive into this interesting topic, maybe we can start with a bit about your background in pharma and quality, and maybe you can pinpoint the main roles that you served in pharma and the steps you made to get to leadership roles.
Sure. So, I have been in the life sciences space for about 20 years now. Started in the laboratory, early in my career, and realized from there that I wanted to get into something different and something bigger within an organization. So I moved into quality systems. Then I worked in quality operations and then quality compliance. So I have worked through pretty much every quality role you could within my early career and throughout even to today. So I went into leadership when I was a supervisor of quality systems. That was my first real leadership role where I led a team in the system space. Loved it. I loved everything about quality systems. It's one of my favorite areas if I had to choose one. And then from there, I moved into leading quality compliance for a couple of consulting organizations. Did that for a couple of years and then wanted to get back into industry. I feel like when you're consulting, especially in the middle of your career, it's important to kind of at some point go back to industry, see what's going on again, get back into the swing of things on the other side of the fence. So I went back to industry for a while as the VP of quality for a couple small organizations. Did that for a little bit and then thought that it would be great to get back to consulting. It was time for me to go back again. So I've been consulting for the last year or so again. So out of the 20 years, I've consulted for about 10. So about half my career, actually. I didn't realize that till now. Yeah, right. So, and I've helped in all areas of quality. And now I'm actually leading the quality and clinical teams at Network Partners Group. So consulting again in that space.
Right. So you had a nice journey, and it's so interesting. So I think that's really correct that sometimes we need to go back to the industry to understand what's going on. So this is one of the reasons I also chose to do auditing as a part of my activities, because sometimes you want to go back, see what's going on the ground, because otherwise it's difficult to stay current and really know what are the hot topics. So, we organize events and webinars, so we always need to be on top of things. And if you're not there, it's a bit more difficult, but that's why I also love having those chats with experts such as yourself, because it helps me understand what's going on there and feel connected to the industry.
Yeah, and that was my thought too, throughout my career is how do I stay on top of things? How do I keep moving forward? How do I keep growing? And that's why for me, it was important from consulting to go back for a little bit to industry and then come back again, to really be able to lead more effectively, understand, both sides of the story, as a consultant or as a sponsor. So for me, that was why I did what I did. But
yeah, so I think it was a nice decision, and good to see that you're back in consulting, and you now added before that you were mostly in pharma. Now you have added clinical to that. So that's opens another world of opportunities
It
and
sure does.
challenges, right?
Yes, and it's something I've always enjoyed supporting and working closely with clinical teams. And I've led some clinical teams in the past, and that was when I had little clinical experience, and they taught me everything that I need to know. So, having a great team with you is key to being a great leader. So, for me, being able to now do that again is super exciting. I love that space, and quality and clinical need to work hand in hand, so it works well.
Yeah, so so I never had the chance to work in the clinical arena, only in research than pharma. So I think right in clinical, it's probably smaller teams, it's less smaller organizations, right, than big pharma. So you're more attached to what's happening on the ground, and yeah, so it's I guess it's quite different leadership styles, maybe corporate versus smaller companies, more connected to the teams and to each individual contributors, right?
Yes, and for me, I tend to I tend to move towards those smaller organizations. For me, I enjoy a less corporate feel when I'm working with clients. When I'm working with the clinical teams, the smaller teams, you really get to know people a lot better and a lot more. And for me, anyone that I work with alongside, I want to get to know you. I want to know, as much as I can about you. I want you to get to know me. I feel like building the relationship is the key piece to being able to not only work together better, but lead each other, support each other the best way we can through whatever jobs we're doing together, right? And then even maybe outside of that, like how can I help you network? How can I help you grow? Is there anything that I can do for you outside of the consulting space? So it's really important for me to get to know who we're working with. And I tend to favor the smaller, mid-sized clients for that reason. It's easy to get to know everybody.
Yeah, so I can agree on that. So there are perks for both working for and with bigger companies. So as a professionals, you probably can learn much more in smaller companies because you wear more hats. You have more responsibilities. So I usually when people ask me and the people after university and so on, or want to start their journey in quality, and they ask, oh, should I go to a big company, small company? So I say, it depends what you want. You want stability, you go to a big company, but you will probably you can gain expertise in a very narrow area. But if you go into a smaller company, you can really expand your knowledge vastly. You will probably be dropped more into the cold water, a lot of self-learning, and probably you will have less training time, but you will probably learn much more and help you get in touch with the other departments, so on, right? So do you agree on that as well?
I do. I think as a young professional, early in your career, like for me anyhow, I wanted to know as much as I could, as fast as I could. And I think early on, it helps you early in your career to go somewhere smaller where you can learn a bunch of different things and see, well, what do I like? What do I enjoy doing the most? And then start narrowing in on what you love to do because you're working for a really long time, right? So you might as well love what you do. So it's really important to find what fits you. And the earlier you find it, the happier you'll be in your career. Because then you'll know what you need to learn more of, what you want to focus on. So yeah, I agree completely.
Yeah. And if we go narrow to the topic of the women leadership in pharma, right? So pharma is a quite unique working space, right? So it is known that in many industries that there is a bias and salary bias, and for women is more difficult to get managerial roles or leadership roles. So do you feel that pharma is a bit different, or would you say there are still challenges that you had to face that your male counterparts didn't have to?
So I feel like it's getting better from when I was younger. And when I first entered leadership, it was very tough for me early on. And the places that I was at and the people that I worked with, I did notice it was pretty much led by men, pretty much across most companies I worked with. And some were more open than others, right? Because every company is different. But for me, entering leadership as a young woman, it was very difficult when everybody else was a man. And then certain things were expected that it was harder for a young woman, especially because I had young children at the time, to be able to do certain things, right? Because I was trying to be a leader, a mentor, and a mom, and a wife, right? All at the same time. So it was tough. And I can say I did get a lot of backlash for some of that in my early career, but I could say it's the last, I don't know, 8-9 years of my career have been way better. And I don't know if that's because I've chosen my companies more selectively. I've paid attention to culture. As I've moved from company to company, culture is going to be key. I also make sure I look at leadership. What does leadership look like before I go from job to job now, right? Are there women there? Are there men there who are mentors to other women and vice versa, right? For me, I want the culture's the key, right? And then who you see sitting in leadership or in those influential positions, even if they're not necessarily in leadership, but sometimes you lead by influence, right? Not necessarily by title or where you sit on the hierarchy, but who's influencing. And I think as I moved up in my career, I made sure to look at those things because early in my career, I had some terrible situations that taught me a lot. But without those situations, I would have never known all these things, right? So being selective is key as you move to your next journey in your career.
Yeah. So that's quite interesting. This experience because I think when men go to similar roles, they don't probably feel the same pressure or because they are not aware of different biases, right? So when I started my careers, I worked at the beginning. My first two companies was pharmaceutical. Second was Bayer, both huge corporations. And what I've seen, interestingly, that I started in the quality control, and I've seen that actually it was a more female-dominated area, right? So all my managers forever, like direct ones at least, were always women for me.
Okay.
I think that in pharma, I never had a direct male manager. And that's why.
Mine was the opposite for most of my career, not the whole thing, but most of my career. Yeah.
So maybe because of that, it got me thinking that maybe pharma, because it's more of a science environment, there are a lot also in the university, a lot of women. Like when I said biotech, there were more women there than men because men maybe chose different paths, and also it translated to the laboratory and also in the quality assurance. Almost all, like I don't know, maybe 70% in the managers in the quality assurance were women, and I was like, for my surrounding, it was like for me, it's a great environment for women to flourish if they get, as you said, to the right organizations and the right places. But as you said, it seems that it's not always the case. And you said that there were difficulties and you encounter backlashes. So can you elaborate on that? So
Sure.
like what kind of backlashes, and why do you think, like, if it was the same position where it was like a man, it would be the same attitude to it?
So I had early, it was my first leadership position. And that's where I had, I think, the most challenges because pretty much all the directors and above were all men. And most of the managers, senior managers, and like supervisors were all women, which was kind of funny the way that played out. But, there were times where I had to make some decisions on certain products. And when I would make those decisions, if they weren't what they wanted to hear, it was a problem. So for me, as a quality person, and I feel I have a lot of integrity. So if I don't think something should be done, right, I'm not going to I'm not going to bend because, someone above me said so, right? Or said, well, we need to make money. We need to push this out. We need to get it out faster. Okay, well, I understand the business side, right? Especially now in my career, I understand there's a business side and then there's the quality side. And, sometimes you have to be able to speak both languages as a leader to translate things. And I think back then I probably didn't have enough knowledge or understanding how the two mesh together, which was a growth opportunity for me when I was having those issues. But on the other side, I feel like if I was working with women when I was making those decisions, I feel like they might have listened a little more and maybe not been so authoritative, because that was a lot of the way those companies worked was, well, I'm the VP and you're going to do it because I said so, whether it's right or not, right? And that's not how I function. So to me, if it's wrong, it's wrong. If it's right, it's right. And if there's a way we can work in between, great. But let's sit down and figure it out together. It's not well, I told you to do this way, so you have to, right? And that's not how I work. So I think it's the way I've seen the companies I've been with since then. I make sure that there's a collaborative style, right? When I meet these people, like, can we talk through things? Can we try and be innovative? Okay, something's not working. Is there an interesting way around getting it to work? Or how can we get it to work? Let's get a team together. Let's figure it out. I'm not very authoritative in my style, more informal. I like to have conversations. I like to understand people. So for me, back early in my career, that was really difficult when I had people telling me what to do, whether it was right or not. And that's when, you realize, okay, it's time for me to move on, right? When you're no longer getting opportunity for growth. And then because I wouldn't always agree on certain things, it hindered my growth where I was. Oh, okay, well, you're not going to do this now because you won't do this as fast as we need it. Or, as an example, it was a challenge. And because I had young kids at the time, there was a lot of, well, why do you have to leave at this time? Well, I come in extra early, to kind of balance it out. And I work on the weekends and, I put in the extra time. I feel like it's a lot more demanding for a woman, at least it was back then, to be able to do it all and be everything, right? Whereas now, most of the companies I've been with are very family oriented. We all have families. We all understand how that goes. A kid is sick. You have a kid standing behind you or whatever while you're talking, to somebody. It's become a little more normal. I don't know if that is because of COVID and whatnot and people having to work with families all around where we're more accepting. But back then it wasn't as accepting. So a lot of backlash for that. And it really hindered my growth where I was. So, one of the catalysts from my experience early in leadership was to move on and start some women in leadership group. So one of the things I did out of my experiences over the last couple of years, I joined ASQ, and I've been an active member with them for a long time. But they were looking to have some women in leadership chairs within their organization. And of course, I raised my hand. I'd love to do it. I want to help, right? How can I help? So I've been the Women in Quality Chair for ASQ for some time now, and I support being a mentor to some young women in their career. We meet monthly or at some cadence, and I help them work through their careers, what they want to learn, where they want to go. I also coach some women out of that forum through situations like I went through. Okay, here I'm having this problem with my boss. How should I handle it, or what should we do? I help them work through those situations. And then I also do monthly webinars as well. They'll start back up in the fall around women's leadership, whether it's, topics of negotiation, how to negotiate better, quality culture as a women leader, being seen as a valued business partner. That's a big issue for women, I think, as well as being seen, as a person who should be sitting in all the business decisions, and especially as a quality leader and a quality leader that's a woman, we should really be up there sitting in the board, in with the executive team, supporting the business at the top, right? Building in quality right up front where all the business decisions are made. And how can I empower other women? So that's why I do Women in Quality. So if anybody wants to join Women in Quality with ASQ, I would be happy to share my information.
That's great. So you can share that with with me, and then I can put it in the post for this podcast. So people who would like to get more information, they can follow this link or get in touch with you. So I think it's very helpful to have such groups and events, and that it can be overwhelming to come to a big organization or pharma, and depending which country you're at, in some countries it's very authoritative, some is it's with with your peers than others. So people from all over the world can contribute here and there from their perspective, what's happening in their countries, right? So it probably also varies between the countries and etc., right? And so you said you had difficulties where it was difficult to convince people with information, right? So do you think if it was a man, for example, a VP said, no, we need to do this and that, I'm the VP, I'm saying that. So do you think if a man with who is probably still below the VP would address that, do you think their reaction would be different?
I really think it would depend on the person and their style, who they are. But I know for me, I was very timid and very shy back then. So when someone would come at me like that, I let it be and I didn't address it. I would okay, that was awful. I'm going to go over here now. And I would kind of never really head on confront the situation and really confront them about being disrespectful or working through things a bit differently. I think now that has changed for me a lot, but I think maybe if it was a man and a man, I think it could, that situation probably would have gone quite differently than it did, because I did not stick up for myself at the time. I kind of just was like, okay, well, I'm only the supervisor. I can't say anything, it'll just get me in more trouble. So I'm just going to wait here and see what happens. Right. So I became a little complacent to it until I realized it was time to go. Whereas, now I realize, and this is what I tell young women all the time, is don't allow that to happen. If someone's being disrespectful to you, no matter what level they're at, speak up. If you don't want to speak up to them, look at your HR policies or something like that, or a trusted colleague, somebody you can talk to about it, because you don't want to let anything escalate or possibly, turn into something it doesn't need to be, right? Or maybe there's a miscommunication. You just need someone to help both of you come together, because maybe your communication styles are just very different. And sometimes you need a middle person to kind of help navigate that, or a really good facilitator. But I think sticking up for yourself is key if there's, disrespect in the air.
Right. So I think that's a very, important part, to know who is your friend in the organization and who you can approach if you feel that there is a hostile environment or you're not being heard, and see if somebody can help you out. And sometimes what people sometimes don't realize from the university, that a lot of time you don't want to think about it, but there is a lot of politics. So you need to be smart. You need to connect with the people who you think, or as you said, mentorship, or at least start following people, getting advice from people who you think can be role models in the organization.
Yes.
Leaders, and so and you shouldn't wait until there is an issue, because if there is an issue and you just barge in, I need your help, it doesn't sit well. So you should probably start early, slowly building a relationship with people you admire in the organization, or hold up to, and slowly build a relationship where you can come to them for support. Because I think also in politics, it's not a screaming match. I think the battles are won behind closed doors, or you have the stronger allies sometimes, right?
Yes, no, I agree. I kind of have this little motto that I kind of follow, or this little strategy. And this is something that I've taught at some of my webinars, and I teach it a lot in some quality culture and leadership workshops that I do. is that everybody in their career, and I say, like you mentioned, start early on, right? Don't wait for an issue to happen, but everyone should look for a mentor, someone that can guide them, encourage them, and a coach, right? Someone who can kind of push them to their goals, right? Tell them what to do, not necessarily how to do it, but how to get to their goals, right? Have that trusted friend within the organization. Have somebody that's can sanity check them, help them through things like, hey, am I reading this wrong? And it should be someone in their organization, right? That trusted friend or trusted partner, so that they can support each other through some of the challenging times at work. And a sponsor, right? Somebody, like you said, your ally who may be a couple levels up, but somebody who will talk about you when you're not in the room, right? They will say great things. Your name will pop up because they believe in you. They will be like your influencer within the organization, right? Start developing those key relationships, and that will help you a lot in your career.
Do you have any advice on how to build such relationships in a way which is natural and not, over demanding, and that the person would actually be, interested naturally to support you?
So I think it's about finding the right people you click with. The first mentor you find may not be the mentor you stick with, right? It may not, you may not click. It may seem like it's great in the beginning, and then you both realize you're on two different paths, right? You want to find people who fit within your own belief set, your own values, people that have the same kind of culture outlook that you do. I think it'll help better because you'll all be on the same pathway, right? The same journey. They might be ahead of you, but you're all on that same road, all right? And they'll understand where you're coming from and what you're talking about. Finding people in an organization that you realize, oh, I love talking to this person. I wonder if they'd be willing to mentor me, right? Or I really look up to this person. I'd love to be them one day. How do I do that? I found for me, I just go up to them. I say, hey, I absolutely adore you. I love what you do. I watch what, I see how you handle yourself in the board meetings. I see this, I see that. Like, will you be my mentor? I mean, I would love to understand how you got there. And most people are super willing to be like, oh, that's really awesome. Yeah, let's have, let's sit and let's talk about it. And then see if it clicks. I think you have to kind of put yourself out there a little bit with people to tell them what you need. And at the same time, can that person reciprocate and give me that? A lot of people, I think, senior in their career are very willing to start mentorships or coaching for the younger generation, because I won't be here forever, right? So how do I pass on what I know? And it's by mentoring, coaching, and developing others, which is why I love leading teams, because I love teaching and developing. Like, I want to see people push past their comfort zones. I want to help push them over the edge a little bit, right? Help them get there a little faster. Because that's one of the things I realized that having a good mentor has done for me. They've pushed me past so many different comfort levels, but I wouldn't be where I am today if they didn't. So,
Yeah, so I think that's very correct what you're saying. And I think when I was younger and starting such positions, I had people who I thought, were really great at what they do, and but I didn't have the knowledge or the communication skill in such hierarchical, company to think, okay, can I come to this person and say, what you're doing is great. I want to learn, to speak in a meeting as you do, and to lead a meeting, or to encourage people, and et cetera, et cetera, because I think people actually can be flattered by that, and they can actually like, if I'm thinking, if somebody would come to me and say, I would like to learn how you do this and that, so I probably would say, sure, come, I have a meeting, see, you can be a fly on the wall, right? So just sit there, listen, see what's going on, right? So sometimes it's that easy. So I think sometimes there is no issue that if you want to learn something that somebody just won't tell you, just, I have a meeting with the board of director, and I don't know, they don't mind, just, come, sit, if it's not something like confidential, and you can just observe and build relationship with that, right? So this is something that is so true, that sometimes we just need the courage or the knowledge that at such a younger age to say, you know what, people, um, experienced people love sharing their expertise, so don't be shy to ask for it, right?
Yes, and I think that's what we need to spread a little bit is communicate. If you want something, you got to say it, because if you're not, somebody else is, right? And one of the things I learned early on, which I wish I did more of, I wish I asked for more of what I wanted early on in my career, but I realized the most that can happen is they say no. Okay, no big deal, right? Move on. So really, there's not much bad that can come from even asking.
Right. Only good at the end, right? So either you get it or you don't get it. But sometimes, as you said, sometimes you just need to change location, right? Change your place, change your luck, because sometimes you are in an illusion that, you have dreams. I don't know if you want to be VP of quality or whatever you want to become, right?
Mhm.
You're in an organization, and you think, yeah, I can do it by myself. But if you ask them, they might say, you know what, good that you ask. You have a program, leadership program, and you might be good for it. Let's do a test, or let's try it out. Or they could say, you know what, we don't think that you will. We can, from our assessment, it's not for
Mhm.
you, right? So then you can either just take it up, just accept it, or you can say, you know what, I believe in myself, and if you don't believe in me, then I will find another organization that will believe in me, right?
Well,
And the sooner you realize that, don't so the before you waste 5-10 years in such a company, like battling position after position without
mhm.
even realizing that your road is blocked there because somebody, maybe somebody doesn't like you up tops, and you don't have somebody to stick up for you, and you're just fighting against waves that you cannot beat, right? So then you just change location.
Yes, yep. And that's why it's important to, if you see that happening somewhere, be very selective of where you go next. Look for the opposite of everything you've had, right? And look for somewhere that, you mentioned a leadership program. A lot of companies now have some type of mentorship or leadership program. I see that more and more with my clients, with the past companies I've been with, and even at the company I'm at, we have a leadership program as well for newly graduating students that we develop and mentor them early on in their careers. So that was actually one of the main reasons I chose to come to Network Partners, was because of their ability to mentor and develop and teach others with the leadership program. So a lot of companies have leadership programs. So, young men and women in their career, I suggest that you look for a company that has one. That means that they invest in their employees, right? These are the little things you need to look for how mature is the company that I want to go to, right? When it comes to the leadership, the quality culture, are they family oriented? Do they have the same values you have? Make sure you can find a company that aligns with your values, because if they really don't, you're going to struggle there, right? Or you'll have to compromise and be willing to compromise your value set to match theirs. So those are some of the tips for, finding that next step. If you've had such a rough time somewhere, those are some of the things I look for.
Right, right. And if you're talking about the leadership style, right? So you said you're not confrontational, right? You're more informational, right? And I know that there is this thought that for a woman to go up in the ranks, right? They need to be like overly aggressive, and need to be like always, they need to shout louder than the men, and like make sure that the men are intimidated, right? So I've seen such women that actually do it, and I think it's like can be exhausting, like to walk around always like like pissed off, and like get so everybody's like scared of you, because I don't think it's healthy, right? I don't know, like even if it's it's just the way you are. I don't think it's very healthy. But a lot of people believe that this is how women need to act in order to compete in the male world, right? So, what is your thoughts on that?
So actually, that was when I had the big issues I had early in my first leadership positions. Some of the HR folks there, when I would go to them and escalate issues that were happening to me, some of the advice that they gave me is act more like a man. Take up space in the meeting rooms. Take up space. Sit a certain way. Right?
Okay.
They said, be louder. Stand up taller. Wear heels those days. I'm a very I know you can't tell here, but I'm short. So that was their advice is, well, put on heels that day so you look taller and bigger. And I'm like, okay. And so early in my career, I didn't really like, what do you mean act more like a man? So I really had to think about that for a while.
Okay,
And I
that's
think that was,
interesting.
yes.
Okay.
So it really
Yeah,
fits.
bring a gun, right? Come with a machete, right?
Yeah. So
Okay.
it really, as soon as I heard you say what you said, it triggered that memory where I was told to act more like a
It's
man.
interesting. And
And
what do you think about it now? Like, is it a good advice or there is a
I
better
don't
way?
so. I mean, I don't think so. For me, I think if you're authentic, so I'm big on authenticity. I don't change who I am, whether I'm talking to you or the CEO or whether I'm talking to, one of our leadership program folks right out of college. I talk to everybody the same. I'm very authentic and true to my values. And I'm willing to, go into the gray and go back and forth and help you out. But as far as being being me, I'm going to be me no matter where I am and no matter who I'm talking to. And I feel like that has actually helped me move up in my career more than anything else. I think the whole act like a man statement that was given to me is really not the way the work culture is going, right? It's
Right.
passion led, right? More people are following their passion than anything else. And that's because they're moving within their value set rather than the old school way of, authoritative workforces and things like that. I feel like it's not like that anymore. And the culture's not going that way in the life science industry, anyhow, that I see.
Yeah.
So I think be yourself, and again, yes, sometimes you have to be firm. Sometimes you have to be serious, right? But be you all the time, right? I'm not one of those where I don't like to put on like a face, to try and get someone to like me or see my viewpoint. No, let's talk about it. And this is who I am. And this is how I'm going to do it. And I'm not going to shout. I'm not going to be disrespectful. I'm not going to take up space or wear heels that day. Right.
Did you get this advice from a man or a woman? That's
From a
interesting.
man.
From a man. Okay.
Yes. There were no women in HR at the
Obviously.
time. So
Okay, but it's quite interesting. Where does this, training or ideas come from? Is it something that they actually were learning in psychology and and they brought it up that they say, okay, this is the healthy way to encourage women, change. Be you wanna play the game, be like a man, which is absurd, right?
yeah, I think that there's just natural things between men and women that make us each unique and work better together if we can focus on our strengths. And I have had, while I've had some very awful situation with some men in leadership, I've had some really amazing relationships with men in leadership. So not everyone is the same. I can say that. And, I think it's just finding, again, the culture that fits with yours. But I do not think it's healthy to take that type of advice unless that's who you are, right? Unless you are maybe a little more introverted, or maybe you, you are, I don't know how to, I'm trying to think of the right words. Maybe you're on the quieter side. Maybe you want to be more technical. Well, then I think you need to take those pieces into account and just really understand, what do you want from your next role? What do you want from your people, the people around you? What do you want from a mentor? What do you want from a sponsor? Because everyone has different wants and needs. Some people do want to get up and be VP of quality, right? And then there's others who know, I just want to do my job. I want to work in the lab. I'm happy doing my lab stuff. And that's all I want to do for my career because it makes me truly happy. So I think it's understanding early in your career what you love, what you want, what your goals are, and where you want to be, right? And then try and just keep hitting those goals. But acting outside of your own character is
Right.
not in anyone's best interest.
Right. So if you look back to this situation
Mhm.
and you analyze it, right, the situation where it's stuck in your memory, where there was this VP and he was very authoritative and you didn't act, right? So what would you have done differently, which is not, we're in the hills, right? So what do you and or shouting? I don't know. So or is it the solution? So what do you think you would have done differently, and and which have impacted the situation?
So I think if I knew what I know now, if I knew all of this information back
Yeah.
then, I probably I would have stood up for myself a little bit more. I think I would have been a little more vocal because I was very shy back then, especially because it was my first leadership position. And again, I was learning. So I was hoping I would have this learning environment, even though I did not. But I I wish I would have been louder and more vocal, not necessarily shy, but vocal and firm that, the way you speak to me, the way you treat me in front of everybody and in meetings. And, I wish I would have been more vocal about the disrespect, especially because I never returned it because I don't feel that, oh, well, match disrespect with disrespect. That doesn't work for me either. So I was always still super respectful, still nice, still did what I had to do. But I wish I would have been more vocal to maybe nip it in the butt or show that into those couple of individuals that you can't treat me this way, just because you're whoever you are, right? That it's not acceptable and that I'm not going to tolerate it. And I wish I would have been a little more vocal for my own self. Even if it worked or didn't work, I think to ease my own regret slightly, I wish I would have been more vocal. But you don't know what you don't know at the time. So that's a learning for me now is ever since then, I no longer let that happen. And it really doesn't because I'm very selective about where I go and the people I bring into my circle.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So it's so it's very interesting about improving yourself and using the knowledge that you have, but also the what the HR said, and so I myself, I'm also introverted, right? And
Mhm.
I never felt it easy in big meetings with like 20 people to be the one to speak up. So I said, okay, I need to improve some parts, and I read books about communication and so on. And one of the books that comes to my mind right now, and it is quite, I think, there was an advisor that don't think that can work for women, for example. So I think the book was called Difficult Conversations, and
Ah, that
they
one.
they bring their different scenarios and play it out how you should answer. So I think this is was that book, and in this scenario, you're a new employee or something like this, and usually there is this tension where the somebody like in a pack needs to establish authority, right? So usually somebody with a higher rank could say something insulting. So the book what the book recommended basically is it was played from a man, and the books said, okay, so how do you play it out? You say to him, in my neighborhood, if you would have said it to me, I would have punched you in the nose. So please never say it to me again.
Uh,
And now let's be civil or something like this, right? But you can. It's not an advice that probably a woman could say, right? In mine, I would
I feel
punch.
like it would be weird coming out of
Yeah,
my mouth anyway.
yeah. But I think it would be much more impactful because I think if a woman would say it, it will be much more dangerous, right? That in
Yeah,
your neighborhood,
they'd
right?
be surprised.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's very interesting because I never heard such harsh tones in the and I'm not sure that this book would have been probably the HR read it because they give such interesting uh, advices, but I don't think today somebody would appreciate speaking in such tones in
No, and
in boardrooms.
I try to avoid that at all costs. I feel like it doesn't get you anywhere.
Yeah, and so it just shows that even the communication, it can be different from if it's a book that a man wrote, probably it would have different impacts. But so it's interesting. Okay, how would a woman act in such a situation, right? And in this case, I think it's so I also seen, been in companies where, I seen very powerful, women in their career, and very vocal one, and ones that don't shy to, shout and also embarrass men, and just put them in the corner, and which in a way I would say, I don't think it's, it's respectful to the person. It doesn't matter it's a man or a female, right? So I think
Right. Mhm.
there are people, men, female, different, that have different ways of communicating, more harsh, less harsh. But I did notice that um, that a lot of the women that I've seen, actually, in very high positions in global quality and so on, a lot of them had to be very um, aggressive in the board. Like I never. So usually the men that I've seen that are they can they usually talk very calmly and etc. etc. But I did notice that the women did have the women that were in the higher positions. Usually they were acting in a way that they had to be more vocal in the center, and put the people in their places much more vocally than I would say that
I
a
can,
man would do it, because otherwise it maybe if men would have done it, it would be like too aggressive, and people would be really would run to the HR and say, I cannot work with this guy, and then there will be like a fight afterwards or something. I don't know. What do you think about it? Doesn't make sense?
it does. I've seen that. Even though I haven't had as many issues in my career, I've still realized when I was the chief quality officer and when I was VP and other, higher up positions where I had to talk to executives often, um, that I would have to be more vocal. I would have to make sure that I was seen, seen when in quotes I was sitting right there, but that I was seen as a valued business partner. So I had to make sure early on when I do get in with the executive team that I build trust. If I feel like you can tone down that aggressiveness and that being seen and being heard and having to be that little bit extra aggressive just to be able to be part of that team. If you build trust early on, it's helped a lot. Um, as soon as you even interviewing or prior to even joining the company, start building trust with the leadership, having them get to know you as a person. Then it becomes a little bit easier and you can tone that down a little bit in the boardroom when you're having those difficult discussions. I think when they get to know you as a person, on that more personal level, they see you as just that. You are a person. Here, you're this person. Yes, you're also a mom and a wife and a this and a that. And same thing with the men. You're a father. You're a husband. You have daughters, right? Whoever has daughters, it's like you want to sometimes remind them your daughter could be here one day, right? And would you want them to be treated in any such way by a man or a woman? So I see a lot of companies moving in the right direction, at least the ones I've been working with. But I'm sure it's still out there. And I'm sure these women still have to be a little more vocal because even me today, sometimes I need to, right? But it's very few and far between. So, yeah.
Right. So, what would be your final advice that you think could be very impactful, something that women can do easily and quickly? Any exercise or anything that they can do to quickly change things in their career?
Sure. So this is something I did when after I had that big aha moment and I'm like, I need to help other women, right? When I had that moment, what I did was I wrote down 5 things that made me super uncomfortable or scared me. And I made like a list, like these are 5 things I'm afraid of or uncomfortable doing. And then I started tackling each one. Because I knew those were areas of improvement as well, right? It's being self-aware. So take some time to look inside, understand who you are, what things make you uncomfortable, and then attack all of those one at a time, even though it's scary and uncomfortable. Because then once you get past that, you realize how unstoppable you can really be. And you get you get comfortable being uncomfortable. I guess that's the saying, but I really believe in it. And I wish I started that a little earlier in my career too, tackling the things I was scared of.
Yeah, that's a great advice, right? Because a lot of the things that scare us come from an ancient part of the brain that we are afraid that everything can kill us, right? But if you step back, it's nothing to be afraid of, right? And so amazing advice, amazing chat. So Christy, thank you very much for having this chat with me. And if people, young women and people who are interested to hear more advice or want to join the groups that you lead, so we said that we will leave the information in the post, but what is the best way, other way, if you would like for them to contact you? Is it email or just LinkedIn?
LinkedIn is great. I'm very active on it, but I'm happy to also give my email. I'll give that as well, because I'm very open to sharing, very open to meeting new people. To me, it's what makes life wonderful.
Perfect. Right. So we'll have all this info in the description of this podcast. Fascinating talk, Christy. Thank you very much. And I hope we'll chat soon again.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the Qualitalks podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please leave us a 5-star review. If you want to learn more about GMP, please visit us at www.qualistery.com. Stay compliant and see you at the next one.